So she created this virtual background for me that is completely glitch free so far, except for this square is missing. I thank everyone for joining us today. We're at a crisis point in our country on many different levels, but at this particular moment, we are confronted with we've reached a boiling point and a tipping point with regard to racial injustice and inequality and police brutality in this country. And we want to have a conversation about what's happening in our country. And so Jensen and Daniil and I thought we might offer our social media platforms as a megaphone for this distinguished group of panelists to talk about what's happening in our country right now. And I will be asking questions that the audience has presented. And Jensen and Daniil, if you want to say hello here before I introduce the panelists, that would be lovely.
Unmute us there. Hey guys, happy to be here, and like the title card said, we're really here to listen. We want to listen, we want to learn, support the ideas and the actions that are moving us towards real change. I want to apologize for the flags in the background. We're actually here at our daughter's 7th birthday, but we wanted to take this time. Misha, thank you for putting this together, and for the panel, thank you for being here. And I'm just I want to give you guys as big of a voice as we can. So if we can do a little bit of that and continue to learn, that's why we're here.
Yes.
All right, thank you guys. And now I would like to just introduce our panelists here that have so graciously agreed to join us. We have Brionajenkins, and sorry, my eyes are going to be darting down below. I'm just reading a little bit here. Brianna, I actually just met yesterday. She is a friend of Jensen and Daniil. She's an activist for the LGBTQIA community in Austin, Texas, and beyond, and for people of color in that community. She was a speaker at the Women's March in Austin and at many other rallies over the past few years. She has a podcast, Tea with Bree, and has received numerous awards, as well as being a speaker at the 2020 Austin, UT Austin graduation commencement. I don't know, what do you call it? But that's amazing. Congratulations.
The Lavender graduation. The UT Gender and Sexuality Center has a graduation every year for the young adults who use their services, and I was their speaker this year.
Oh, awesome. That's very cool. We have with us Baratunde Thurston, who is a writer, comedian, activist, commentator, whom I met less than a month ago, I believe, over text initially. I've been following his work on Instagram and beyond. It's inspiring, insightful, intellectually gritty, emotionally compelling work that is also imbued with humor and wisdom. And I encourage you all to follow him because it's really helpful material and interesting perspective that he provides. Baratunde has worked, he worked at The Onion. He worked, I'm sorry, I put together very long bios for all of you because you're so accomplished, and now I'm trying to condense. He wrote the best-selling book, How to Be Black. He has done a TED Talk, and he has advised the Obama White House, among many other accomplishments. We have Reverend Deborah Johnson, whom I met in the fall of 2016. She came to my house to facilitate a conversation on how we could move forward with optimism and activism in a time that felt like a real crisis point for many of us in our country. It was shortly after the November election. And I remember leaving that meeting just feeling incredibly buoyant and full of optimism and hope. I've carried that with me ever since. Rev D is a founding minister and president of Inner Light Ministries. She's author of The Sacred Yes, and Your Deepest Intent of the Letters from the Infinite series, as well as Living the Sacred Yes. She is an inductee of the Board of Preachers of the Martin Luther King Jr. Chapel and Morehouse College. She is a pioneering activist for gay rights in California, and won some landmark court cases that actually shifted legislation permanently. Daryl Davis is our last panelist. Daryl Davis, Baratunde, when I was telling him that you were going to be on this, he called you the Klan Whisperer. Daryl Davis is famous for having converted many Klansmen away from the Klan. He has a closet full of Klansmen's robes, who have given up the Klan, men who have given up the Klan through conversation with Daryl. So the power of communication, the power of listening, the power of talking, Daryl has demonstrated has the power to change people. And it's incredibly powerful. Daryl and I have been working together for the past couple of years to try to bring his life story to the screen. He's an inspiration. He's a musician. He wrote a book called Clandestine Relationships, and he hosts a podcast. I have lost the name of your podcast, Daryl. You're going to have to tell me what it is. Sorry.
Changing Minds.
Changing Minds.
With Daryl Davis.
He's been featured on numerous media outlets, CNN, NPR, Washington Post, and there's a documentary on Daryl Davis on Netflix. So without more rambling, I'm going to begin this seminar. We have a bit of a prompt for our panelists, which is actually inspired by Rev D. Yesterday, Rev D said to me something that Michael Beckwith said to her, which is that pain pushes until, oh no, I've lost my thought. What is it, Rev D?
Pain pushes until vision pulls.
Pain pushes until vision pulls. And we, at this moment in this country, are at a pain point. And we want to know if you could offer any insight on what possibilities this moment might be pulling us toward. And since you're front and center on my screen, Daryl, perhaps you can kick this off.
Well, I think, the tipping point is coming now. And I know it happens all the time. Every time there's a shooting or a killing of an unarmed Black man, we think, the change is that's going to be the change and everything's going to improve. It does improve slightly each time. But the point is that we've been still fighting the Civil War since it officially ended in 1865. It is simply mutated, but it continues. It mutated into slavery ended, but it mutated into segregation and Jim Crow, into the Ku Klux Klan, into the neo-Nazis, now into the alt-right. And still, we continue to be treated unequally. But going forward, I think one of the biggest things that we've seen now is that people of all colors are coming and lending voice to this change that must take place. And that is a good sign. And I feel that the end of this war is nearing.
Brianna, you want to go next?
Yeah, like Daryl said, being, a person who has grown up the last couple of years, me being 30, and realizing that not that things have changed, but just like Daryl said, like just mutated. Like there are things we're still experiencing, and the fact that we are still having the same conversation, pardon me. But now more people are coming to the table, and more people are giving up their space and letting people of color hold this space and giving us a chance to speak and listen and learn and have conversation, and lowering their guard of being like, I'm going to tell you why you're wrong, but changing it to the, I'm going to tell you why you should be listening. And then other people coming to us saying they're willing to listen, I think is the most important thing. As a Black person, having to constantly tell why there is a problem that exists when we didn't create the problem is very exhausting, and having people who aren't Black know that, and we don't have to keep validating that, and we don't have to keep experiencing that. So the tipping point is here. I mean, we see it now with, you know, all the protests and the march that are going on now, and the droves of people who have really showed up in it, not being just Black people. And, you know, it's eerie to see how similar it is to the civil rights movement, seeing how history really does repeat itself. So I think the tipping point is always coming in ebbs and flows, but I feel like this one's just really gonna flow this time.
Thank you. Baratunde?
Can you do me a favor, Misha, and just restate the question to me for a sec?
Yeah. The prompt came from pain pushes until vision pulls, and the question is, where is this moment potentially taking us? What is the possibility that this moment presents us?
So I will get to those possibilities. Hello from Highland Park, Los Angeles, everybody watching. And I think in terms of where that pull can lead us, I've dropped a link just for your Gish community on my IG profile link in terms of follow-ups and things people can do. I know a lot of people are hungry to get involved and be useful. And there are a lot of resources flying around. I've pointed to a few, and it'll continue to grow. So if you want to get into this even more, thank you and welcome. And that's a place where people can find that, again, on my IG profile link. I think that pain is at a particular moment and at a tipping point. There's a lot of alliteration there. I'm not even trying to be a poet. Because of the drama of the current moment, I think it's worth taking a minute to see why this moment feels a little different, because the history's been there, and we've been through so many of these incidents before, and the backlashes and the backlash to the backlash. But on top of that, what happened to George Floyd in particular, because there was videotape like Rodney King in '92, but higher resolution and even more offensive. It was so flagrant, a violation of someone's humanity. And there's no excuse for it. There's just, even the people who found excuses for the other incidents cannot find one here. This is atrocious. So the level of atrocity is so obvious, it makes the pain more acute. I think the absolute lack of national leadership in terms of federal national leadership in this moment leaves us all feeling more angry and more alone in that anger. We're having that anger stoked and accelerated, this fuel being poured in the fire by someone who should be aiding and calming and comforting us, who's incapable of doing that and rising to the moment. And we've been locked in our homes for 2.5 months. You know, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. So I think the country's being given a very unsubtle opportunity to be like, yo, this time is different, because the circumstances that this incident has happened under are so extreme and so undeniable and so atrocious, we have to take a look at it. So the possibilities that I would look forward to, and I don't know if this is going to happen. Parts of me are very optimistic. The other part says we've been through this so many times before, who knows? But here's where that vision could pull us toward: shared ownership of the problems, shared responsibility for the solutions. I'm seeing some light in this dark tunnel in the number of white people showing up physically, using the privilege that comes with that skin often to shield other protesters from police, the levels of question asking, the levels of outrage that's not just from Black people, but from people who care about life in general. is a good sign and a good opportunity. And I think the more we can collectively own the history that we've all been born into and be real about that, and collectively commit to implementing solutions and not be like, oh, you go solve your Black people problems. Same with women, you go solve your female problems. Like, no, men have to show up for that. So shared ownership of the problem and shared responsibility for the solution. That's where this tipping point moment could pull us toward. And I'm very excited about that possibility.
Thank you. Rev D.
Well, I really appreciate being part of this discussion. And I feel like so much of what I would say has already been said, but I want to expound a little bit on what my brother Baratunde just said, that part of what I see in the possibilities of this moment is that there's a new level of an awakening. See, you can't heal what you don't feel. You can't heal what you don't feel. One of the themes of my work is feel, deal, and heal. Feel, deal, and heal. And part of what I see different about this moment, and I'm speaking now from the standpoint of having been a professional cultural diversity trainer literally for decades, is that the discussion is finally shifting. That the discussion about racism is no longer a euphemism for just people of color, or race no longer just means somebody who isn't white. There is an increasing understanding now that everybody has something to do with this. Not only does everybody have something to do with this, but the problem isn't just that Black people keep dying in the streets. The problem is that white people with authority keep killing them. Now, that may seem like I'm splitting hairs here, but the difference in the understanding of that is tremendous. And honestly, for the first time, I am seeing a different level of a sense of an accountability where the people who can actually do something about it realize that it is their responsibility to do something about it. And though 30 cities are up in flames right now, and I'm not saying that we're having anywhere near justice, but I'm telling you, a couple of days ago, when I heard that the officer that had his knee on the neck of George Floyd, that not only had all of those officers already been fired, but that he was arrested and in custody and charged with murder. This has never happened before. It has never, ever happened before. Such quick accountability. And I'm not saying that there's a panacea and that, we've reached nirvana, but that mark of the moral universe is long, and I can watch it starting to bend towards justice.
Yeah, feels true. Thank you all. I am going to now go to some questions that are presented that were posted earlier by audience members. And these questions are coming from all different perspectives. And I'll just start. I'll start with one that feels actually a little bit inflammatory. This is from Kat Johnson. What justification can there possibly be in looting and arson?
Well, I'll take that one. There's no justification for looting. There's no justification for arson, but there is a reason why people light those buildings on fire and destroy property. Part of it, I'm not justifying it, I'm just giving you the reason. Part of it is frustration. Another part of it is, look at it this way, when you are speeding and a police officer pulls you over and gives you a ticket, that costs you money. If you get sued, it costs you money. And anything that costs you money is a deterrent for you not to do it again. And when the courts have let these people down time after time after time, year after year after year, decade after decade after decade, they feel they have no recourse except to talk their language, which is cost somebody money. And when they burn down these buildings and destroy the property, they are costing the city money. The city is being given that speeding ticket or being sued where they know they can win because they cause millions and millions of dollars worth of damage that the city ends up having to pay for. And if you want to teach somebody a lesson, something like that, you hit them in their wallet. I'm not advocating that. I'm just giving you the reason why these things are happening.
I'd like to add on this. Looting is a phrase that is often employed to delegitimize people's pain and expression. And uprising is probably a better word for what we're seeing across this country after folks have been held silent, captive, and victimized for so long. I think looting best describes the founding of this country, if we want to kind of reframe that term of land, of bodies, of souls. And it's a severe sign when people start destroying property and speaking with actions rather than with words through the supposedly democratic process that we have available to us, because that process hasn't worked. I saw a young woman in Minneapolis say, and this video has been flying around, so many of you may have seen her, I've lost 3 brothers to violence like this from law enforcement. And when that law enforcement has never been one to protect you, but rather to prey upon you, and then something so flagrant goes down, and then there's delays in the accountability, the firing, then the talk, oh, maybe we'll prosecute, and then only one of the 4. I take some hope, as the Reverend pointed out, that any prosecution or charge of murder within a week of an incident against a law enforcement officer is probably unprecedented. But so is the flagrancy of the offense here and the absolute undeniability of what happened and the complicity of 4 law enforcement officers in the total degradation and dehumanization of another person in broad daylight, not hiding behind night, multiple cameras, multiple people complaining. And so that is a long cumulative list of offenses that have also gone unanswered. This police department was supposed to implement reforms years ago, and yet this still happens. This officer has at least a dozen complaints against him, and yet he's still entrusted to these streets. So looting and arson are forms of political expression. They are not necessarily the most productive. Again, like Daryl, I'm not advocating, also explaining, but I want to reframe that term looting. And I want to add some weight to why this form of expression over the other attempts, when people try to vote and are denied that basic right enshrined in our Constitution, they try to speak at the ballot, an entire political party tries to deny them that access and says all your votes are fraudulent if they come through the mail. Come on now. People have been trying and they're tired of some of those ineffective methods. So it bursts open at the seams in a moment like this under such pressure.
Brianna, Rev D, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback off of the 2 gentlemen who spoke already, it's also, we know that sometimes in this country, property is more valuable than the people who are in these neighborhoods. And so if you notice and see that there's a building on fire and the people who are lighting it on fire, that's sometimes how we're going to get your attention. Again, like they said, not condoning the behavior, but also, understanding that you need sometimes that visual stimulation before you're willing to listen to someone. They have been trying, we have been willing to have conversations and have done everything in our power we possibly can, and those efforts have gone unnoticed. But you can't ignore a building on fire. You can't ignore people on the street who are in these communities and seeing that, these buildings and these streets and, inanimate objects are more valuable than who we are as people. So yeah, that's just what I would like to add to that, is just we are trying to let you know that we are here and we are wanting to talk and we are wanting to be heard.
What I would add to the discussion is that, when we use this term looting, and there are some things that I think are just kind of get lost in the shuffle here. One is that what we're seeing is not just rage, but it's grief. And one of the ways that grief expresses itself is through anger. I've been working inside prisons for over 20 years now, specifically with males in California state prisons. And it was there that I really got that. I really understood that so many of the things that they had done that had gotten them in prison that were of the violent nature were because nobody had allowed them to learn how to express their grief. So that's one thing I want to say. And we tend to think of grief as what an emotion we experience for something that we've lost. But what I also learned from them is that we also grieve what we never had. The unrequited love. It's like, it's one thing if you had a father and he died, but another if you never had a chance to meet your father. That's a whole other kind of loss. So part of this rage and that you see happening here is people who are so frustrated, not just with what has happened, but with the continuous waiting for something else to happen that hasn't happened yet. The other thing about this is that it isn't random. The targets aren't random. I'm originally from Los Angeles, and Watts was one of the first places to go up when I was a kid. You know, the Rodney King riots were there. When I was a kid, I mean, when I was, you know, like in college. And here's the thing, is that we're not burning down houses. They're not burning down schools. They're not burning down libraries. They're not burning down like random things. All of the things that are burning are signs of economics. People are looting and taking the stuff that they need. And there is this relationship between economics and race that gets played out right in these moments. People are oppressed. They're pissed. They're pissed. And just as they're trying to express their discontent with the violence, they're trying to express their discontent with the economic oppression. And at the risk of taking up a lot of time, I just have to say this, that yes, there's anger and there's rage that's going on, but there is something going on with the level of the violence that's happening right now. And I'm not trying to be the last conspirators, but part of me really wonders how much Russia and some other forces might be back behind some of this stuff, particularly as it goes on to day 5 and 6. When I heard that the police station was under fire, my first thought was, those aren't Black people. Those are not Black people. Because the last thing that we're going to do is go straight up against the popo and burn that, because that's a suicide mission. That's not what's happening. And sure enough, today, the governor of Minnesota comes out and says 80% of the people who are doing this violence now are from out of town. And we're hearing the same thing happening. And I'm bringing that up because Black people are taking the heat for it, and we're taking the rap for it. And I think that there might be some other stuff that's going on here that I don't want to get confused with righteous rage, even though I don't approve of arson and looting.
Yeah, and there have been a lot of videos that have emerged that have supported of you know, white guys smashing windows.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's definitely happening. It just occurs to me, I wonder, you know, if there hadn't been fires and some degree of violence and the National Guard being called up, I wonder if we would be having this conversation on these platforms. It does help push things to a fever pitch that invites more serious attention and conversation. I'm going to read another question. This is from someone with a handle, the invisibility cap. How can one respectfully reach closed-minded people? And what can young people do to spread awareness or inspire others to do the same?
I'll jump. One of the things that those of us who feel like we're right, because we are, but those of us who feel like we're right tend to lean on in moments of conflict with people we think are wrong is facts. We're like, rat-tat-tat-tat with the facts. And it turns out that just a pile of superior information is not enough to break through. And you may have found this with a younger sibling in an argument at the dinner table. You may have found it with a coworker or a schoolmate on the sporting field. We connect as humans through human stories much more than through citable information and research papers. I think we engage folks better with questions than we do with proclamations of righteousness, as right as we know we are. So my advice, and there's studies to back this up. One is a great book by a woman named Celeste Headley that provides some great tips on how to have difficult conversations. Asking people about their feelings and their direct first-person experiences, as opposed to, what do you think about group X, is much more productive. Sharing your own personal experience and your personal feelings and emotions. Why does this moment upset you so much? As you're talking to the friend for whom it's not so upsetting. I statements. I am hurt because that could have been my friend. I am pissed because that's happened to my friend and I never did anything about it before. I'm a little ashamed because I know that police treat me infinitely more respectfully than they do my classmate. Personal is much more powerful when trying to connect with people who don't necessarily agree with you. That's a few tips.
I would wholeheartedly agree, and that has been the key to my success in dealing with white supremacists. Having a conversation and humanizing the other person. You don't have to agree with what they stand for or what they believe in, but you respect their right to express themselves and don't shut them down. Everybody wants to be heard, and a missed opportunity for dialogue is a missed opportunity for conflict resolution. So, for example, when I'm sitting there interviewing some of these grand dragons and imperial wizards and things like that, ask why do they hate me? I've been told because Black people are prone to crime, because it's obvious there are more Blacks in prison than white people. Well, obviously that's a half truth. Yes, there are more Blacks in prison than white people, but it's not because we're all prone to crime. A lot of it has to do with an inequitable justice system. I've also been told that that we're lazy. We don't want to work. We want to scam the government welfare system, and I'm also told that our brains have been created smaller than the brains of white people. Therefore, we don't have the capacity to have higher IQs, which is why we rank very low on SAT scores and things like that. So I'm sitting across from these people, listening to this. Is what they're saying offensive? Absolutely, it's offensive. Am I offended by it? Absolutely not. And why am I not offended by it? Because it does not apply to me. It does not apply to me. So why should I be offended by a lie? So I just let them get it all out. And then when they finish, I explain to them, well, you know what? I don't have a criminal record. I have never been on welfare. I've never measured my brain, but I'm sure it's the same size as anybody else's. And then I point out that the people who score the highest in this country on high school SATs and things like that are Chinese people. So does that mean they have a larger brain than you do? And that kind of puts them off their game a little bit. But they at least have been allowed to speak. And I've given them that platform when they're so used to being shut down and pushed back. So then they reciprocate. I've allowed them to speak, now they allow me to speak. And that's the opportunity to plant a seed. But you can't just plant that seed, you have to come back and water it and nurture it. And that's where the change starts coming as that seed begins to grow. And eventually some of these people, not all, but some of them end up leaving that ideology and quitting and relinquishing their robes and hoods to me. And some of them even come out with me and give lectures all over this country with me. And so conversation, not debate. You know, I mean, sure, you're going to debate things, but don't frame it as a debate, because then people get their wall up and, you know, and they're ready to go to battle. Just say, hey, you know, let's just have a conversation. I want to try to understand how you feel about something. Please enlighten me. And just, you know, listen to them, you know, take the time to listen to them. You don't have to respect what they say, but respect their right to say it. And then in turn, most of them will reciprocate and allow you to air your thing, and their wall will come down.
I just, real quick, Daryl Davis, like, for those of you just entering this space, thank you for showing up. Just thank everyone who's like listening, watching, following up later. Daryl Davis is like Jedi level difficult conversationalist. And so I just want, like, we're all Padawans, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just got my lightsaber license like 2 years ago. And this dude's up here using the Force like Mace Windu, you know, like he is on it. And so just don't think you got to start at the Daryl Davis level and like take on a Klansman, because that is going up against a Sith, and that is straight up gnarly. So just much respect and love to you, Daryl. You have so many years in the game, and your control over the Force and your own energy is so strong. I just, like, for somebody who's like just entering the Academy of Jedi Arts, we could start with smaller targets, like maybe an uncle or a sibling or like a teammate who just says some off-color stuff. Like, why not all lives matter instead of Black Lives Matter? Like, this is start there.
Sure, absolutely. You know, and I see, you know, when I give anywhere from 50 to 80 lectures a year, a lot of colleges, universities, and other things, corporations, churches, synagogues, but I would say 2 to 3 out of every 10 lectures I give at some college, I'll do a Q&A at the end, and then I'm finished and everybody's leaving, but there'll be a group of students who want to come up and ask one last question or touch one of my Klan robes or something like that. 2 or 3 out of 10 times, there'll be some student standing off in the distance by his or herself. And I've come to learn what's going to happen. When the crowd goes away and I'm packing up my stuff, he or she will come over and they'll like look around, make sure nobody's within earshot. And then they'll say, you know, my mother is in the Klan, or my father's in the Klan. And that's how I was raised. And now I'm here at University of wherever. And I'm dating, my boyfriend's Jewish, or my girlfriend's Black, or whatever, or my boyfriend's Muslim. And I can't take that person home. My parents will kill me, or they'll disown me. And I can't tell my friend because they'll drop me. So they have this secret on their chest that's been burning an ulcer in them, and they have to get it out. And I'm the perfect person for them to talk with. And what happens is, in the neighborhood where they were raised, it's pretty much, you know, homogenous each time. They all go to the same high school, they read the same books, they shop at the same grocery store, swim in the same community swimming pool, probably vote for the same person, cheer the same sports team. And then they come to college or university. And college and university is not the neighborhood high school. It's not the neighborhood. Now you got people there in college from all over the country and all over the world. And now they're seeing things. Jews don't have horns, Black people don't have tails, and they're realizing what they learned at home was wrong. You know, their parents wanted them to go get an education, but not that education, and bring that partner back home with them. So this is what they're concerned about. They're getting this education and they're learning. And this is what's happening, why we're seeing more and more of these white people coming into these protests, which is a good thing. They're learning.
Yeah. You know, I find, in addition to everything that's been said, I agree with everything that's been said, that when I stop and really listen to what are their issues, what are their concerns, and the most telling question is, what are you most afraid of? What are you most afraid of? And it's like, if this thing that you fear really does happen, whatever, this person marries this person, this person becomes president, these people get married, you know, like what are you most afraid of? And that's when it always switches. Because what I find is that what they are most afraid of usually is how their own position is going to be lessened, how they're going to be weaker, how they're going to be whatever devalued, they're going to be displaced, they're going to be marginalized, that the hullabaloo, I call it sometimes, about all the stuff that they're doing to these other people is trying to protect their own identity. It's trying to protect their own status. And I think we miss that. We tend to think of racism as discrimination, but discrimination is not the ends. Discrimination is just the means to the ends. The racism is about the upliftment of some. I mean, it was literally created as a social construct. It has no biological validity to it. And so when I'm having these conversations with these closed-minded people, once they start articulating what they are afraid of, their vulnerabilities show up. Their vulnerabilities show up. And there are times that I really, when I'm training people and whatnot, especially to be activists, is to tell them, be mindful of how your progress is somebody else's regress. Be mindful of that, because when your social position changes, it's going to change them. Okay, you free the slaves, the slave master doesn't have a job. If I'm a woman and I'm now going to work, you're going to do some dishes and change some diapers. You know, we have to negotiate the balance of power, so to speak, with people. And a lot of times they just don't know what to do because they've been so accustomed to it being the other way. And I'm not trying to put the burden on the back of the marginalized people, but I have yet to have seen any really successful liberation movement where part of that liberation wasn't just the people who were marginalized articulating the vision for themselves, but also letting the oppressor get a vision of what they can be. When Martin Luther King talks about, I imagine and I have a dream of the little black girl and a little, black, little white girl and little black boy, walking hand in hand. That's a vision not just for Black America, but for white America. For white America. And this helping them to deal with the closed mind is also going to be helping them to gain a vision of possibility where they can also thrive. They can also thrive, that it's not going to be an either or.
And to piggyback off all of that too, I think in my experience, like having these open conversations it's not my job to convince you. Like Baratunde was saying, it's just my job to give you my perspective and tell you about my experience. And like Daryl was saying, to humanize me. I think a lot of these people who are racist don't see us as equal and have all these preconceived notions. But if I'm staring you in the face and you get to meet me and you hear my story and you get to know that I went to college, I grew up with 2 parents, I'm educated, like not just lumping all of these people into one group. Like we are all different. We all have a right to be here. We all have a right to space. But then also keeping, as we think about this next generation of these young leaders and seeing the work that they are doing, reminding them that they have space here too. When they go to these universities, there are organizations and clubs and, people they're going to meet, and these experiences to be able to have these conversations and change starts right in your own community. And we can't just ignore that. We have to be willing to bring in all the people who are right beside us, and the reach that we'll have if you can get to this person who can then get to that person. Like it's that 7 people removed sort of feeling. And yeah, that story that you tell it's going to reverberate and get out there as well.
Thank you. I'm going to ask. We're pretty much at the end of our allotted time here, but I'm gonna close with one final question that perhaps we can answer quickly. And I'm amalgamating a bunch of different questions. We have questions from how can the Latinx community help our Black brothers and sisters? What can white people do to be respectful and powerful allies? Baratunde, you spoke to the fact that this is a shared responsibility in your opening remarks. How can we collectively best be effective allies to one another right now? Brianna.
To begin, we all need to acknowledge that we live in a capitalistic society, and a lot of Black people typically are very disproportional in that. So supporting, number one, organizations and people who are out there doing the work, like Misha today, and using his platform, give up your space to help us tell our stories. Share this space with us. Defend us to the people who you know. Being an ally isn't just something you can do online. I mean, donating and reposting things are great, but what are you doing outside of that? I know right now there's a lot of marches, but we're also in a pandemic, so everyone can't go to that, or they don't feel comfortable going to that. Some of my friends here who are immunocompromised have offered to be emergency contacts if I get arrested at a protest. I mean, there's so many different ways to show up as allies. Get creative, ask the people in your life how you can be supportive. I know it can be awkward and uncomfortable, but that's where growth really happens. And until we get uncomfortable and really want to lower those walls, I feel like change won't happen. So change happens in the uncomfortable spaces.
I think we have to also understand how the chain unravels. What happens at the root of it is ignorance, and if you don't keep that ignorance in check, that ignorance will escalate and breed fear, because we fear those things which we don't understand, those things of which we're ignorant. If you don't keep that fear in check, that fear will escalate and breed hatred, because we hate the things that frighten us. If you don't keep the hatred in check, the hatred will escalate and breed destruction. We destroy those things that we hate. Why? Because we fear. And at the end of the day, we might find out that they were harmless and we were just ignorant. We saw that whole chain unfold 3 years ago on August 12th, 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia, where there was a lot of ignorance, a lot of fear, a lot of hatred. And what did it culminate in? Destruction. When a white supremacist got inside his vehicle and tried to murder as many protesters as he could, ended up injuring 20 and murdering one young lady, Heather Heyer. That's the chain. And the problem that we have is we address it the wrong way. We should not worry about the hatred. Don't concern ourselves with hatred or fear. Those are just symptoms. That's like putting a Band-Aid on top of cancer instead of drilling down to the bone and getting it there. We have to address it from not top down, but bottom up. Address the ignorance. There is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education. And once you eliminate the ignorance, there's nothing to fear. If there's nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. If there's nothing to hate, there's nothing to destroy. So let's stop addressing all these symptoms and get to the bottom of it and begin exposing people, educating them to our needs. And that comes through conversation and dialogue, peaceful conversation and dialogue. Yes, we're going to hear nasty things and insulting things, some intentional, some not intentional, just out of ignorance. But we can address that ignorance and cure it.
I would also say that one of the best ways to be an ally is to confront your own people. That so often people want to be an ally by denouncing, their family, denouncing their racial group. And I see this happening all the time, where I'll have, white friends, and they're telling me, thinking that it's going to make me feel good, how they're not speaking to their brother or their sister, or they've defriended people and they want to come over here and hang out with the people of color. And it's like, no, 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 no. Right now in America, there is a civil war going on in the white community. You have some who are over way on the far right, trying to make just America great again. But there's hardly any people of color in that. Then you've got all the people of color over here, practically, and then some white people over here with us. And the ones who are over here, like with us, feel like that's the way to be the ally. It's like, if you really want to be an ally, yes, be sensitive towards people of color, but please go back, have these conversations, talk to your family. We don't have access. We don't have access to the places where those discussions and those decisions can be made. If you're a man and you want to be an ally, great. Do wonderful things for women. Support us and all the rest of that. But you got to check the men. Until men start checking men, there will be a Me Too movement forever. Until white people start checking white people on the abuse of their privilege and their power, it's going to be people of color going uphill forever. So part of that being an ally is not having shame about privilege, understanding it, owning it, using it, and going amongst the people that you're closest to and calling them into the conversation, not leaving them behind in protest.
We're in church now. That was a master sermon, Reverend. Thank you for taking us there. I'll try to keep it super short because everybody said all the brilliant stuff. Picking up on the point of the Reverend, I made a point in a video earlier this week about Amy Cooper and what I wanted from her friends, quote unquote Amy Cooper, not her specifically, but there are many more like that. And it was similar to this point. There is great power in privilege, and I think shame is a waste of it. Guilt is a waste of power. You don't see Superman moping around, oh, I got lasers in my eyes, oh, I can make the world turn backwards, I was born with all this extra power, whoa, my superhero guilt. No, he uses it to save people. He stops crime. He fights for justice and freedom and all that stuff. And so I think it would have been beautiful if Amy Cooper used the hyperreactivity of the police state to her fake fears to like liberate some children from an ICE detention center or get some N95 masks for frontline healthcare workers, stuff that we all really could benefit from. I put up on screen 3 people, 3 organizations on Instagram that I think can help those of you who are very curious about how to be helpful. Rachel Cargill is a justice worker. She's got documents, she's got training, she's got unlearning seminars. You should just Venmo her your money if you've got money. If you don't, please use it for food and shelter first. Showing Up for Racial Justice is a group designed especially for white Americans who want to be helpful. And they've got local chapters and they've got some great effective work out there. And the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI_org, helmed by the famous Brian Stevenson, played very ably by Michael Brown in, Michael B. Jordan in the film Just Mercy, but his book Just Mercy and what that organization does to highlight the true history. 3 accounts you can follow, 3 organizations you can support, 3 ways to tangibly be helpful. Thank you, Misha, for bringing us all together. And I'm sorry I had to follow that, Reverend. I should have jumped in before, and then
no, my
we
brother.
could have just gone out on the holy word, feeling the spirit.
Thank you all for being here. I feel buoyed by a feeling of possibility right now. And this has felt like an education, but also a call to action. So grateful to you all for your work and your thoughtfulness and the incredible energy that you're putting toward these causes. It's a real inspiration. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wishing you well.
Thank you. Blessings to
Thank you.
everybody.